Good morning, grade 12 students. We're going to continue lesson number 3 on human chromosomes. This is part 3. The objective is to determine the patterns of inheritance humans follow, analyze a pedigree, and specify its relation with human inheritance. Because X and Y chromosomes determine sex, the genes located on them show a pattern of inheritance called sex linkage. Sex linkage is a gene located on sex chromosomes. Genes located on the Y chromosome are found only in males and are passed directly from father to son. Genes found on the X chromosome are found in both sexes, but the fact that men have one X leads to interesting consequences. Example: humans have 3 genes responsible for color vision, all located on the X in the sex chromosomes. In males, a defective allele for any of these genes will result in color blindness, that is, the inability to distinguish between colors. It is important to mention that color blindness is an X-linked recessive trait. That means it's found only on the X sex chromosome and not on the Y. And it's also a recessive trait. A female should have the recessive allele on both of its X chromosomes in order for the gene to be expressed, while the Y chromosome does not carry the allele. So as we have said in the previous video, that the Y chromosome carries only male sex characteristics and does not carry, for example, color blindness. This means that the recessive phenotype of a sex-linked disorder tends to be much more common among males than females. What is a human pedigree? A pedigree is a tree that shows the pattern of inheritance, the absence or presence of a trait according to the relationship between parents, siblings, and offspring. Please follow my interpretation of the figure. The circle will represent a female while the square represents a male. The horizontal line between the male and the female represents a marriage, while the vertical line represents their offspring or children. The circle that is shaded in blue represents a female that expresses a certain trait, while the unshaded square represents a male that doesn't carry this trait. The pedigree in the figure shows how one human trait, a white lock of hair just above the forehead, passes through 3 generations. The allele of the white forelock trait is dominant. At the top of the chart is the grandfather who had the white forelock trait. One of his 3 children inherited the trait. Now look at the 3rd generation. 3 grandchildren have the trait, but 2 do not. By analyzing the pedigree, let's look at the genotypes of the family members. Note, it is very important to know the X-linked genes are carried on the X chromosome and not on the Y. So the Y chromosome does not carry any gene related to the white forelock hair. So let's take an example of a human pedigree and determine the genotypes of the 3 generations. A white forelock is an X-linked or sex-linked dominant trait. A female with normal hair marries a male with white forelock. The following figure is the family pedigree. First of all, we have to designate the symbols of the alleles, and then we have to write the genotypes of generation 1, 2, and 3. So let's designate the symbols of the alleles. Let big F be the dominant allele for presence of white forelock hair, and small f be the recessive allele for no forelock hair trait or normal hair. The father in the 1st generation, shaded square, has the trait of white forelock hair, and by that he will be X big F, since the trait is dominant. Notice that the Y does not carry any of these traits. Let's move on to the mother. The mother should be XX since she's a female, and she's not shaded, That means she has no forelock hair and is recessive homozygous for the trait. She's represented by X small f, X small f. Let's move on and look at generation number 2. The married couple had 3 children, 1 boy and 2 girls. The boy on the left will be X small f y, since he does not have the trait. The girl in the middle, shaded, is XX. She will carry 1 allele from each parent. That is, 1 from the father, which is big F, and 1 from the mother, which is small f. Note that genes act in pairs, and each allele has to come from 1 parent. Thus, she will be X big F, X small f. The same applies for the other sibling in the second generation, X big F, X small f. The boy on the second generation, look at the left, marries a woman that has the forelock trait. So one of the X's has to have a big F. Now let's take a minute and think about the second allele on the other X. If it's a capital F, then all of their children will have white forelock trait. But as we look at their children, we notice that one of the girls do not have the white forelock trait. And by that, we conclude that the mother must be a carrier of the recessive allele and will be heterozygous, X big F, X small f. Thus, the children will carry 1 allele from each parent. The girl on the left will be X big F from the mother and X small f from the father, and the other girl will be X small f, X small f, since she has normal hair. Now the girl in the second generation up on the right marries a male with normal hair, so he will be X small fy. Again, notice that the Y does not carry an allele. Take a minute to examine their children. 2 of them had the white forelock trait, and 1 did not. The male unshaded is X small fy, just like his father. The other male will take the dominant allele from his mother, X big F, Y, and the last girl will share allele from both parents, X big F, X small f. The genotypes of generation 1 are represented by X small f, X small f for the female and X big Fy for the male. The phenotype of generation 1 are female with no forelock trait and male with forelock trait. This is another example of a sex-linked disease. The pedigree shows the inheritance of color blindness in a family of 4 generations. Color blindness is a recessive and X-linked trait. The first question is to designate the symbols of the corresponding alleles. The second question is to write the genotypes of the 4 generations. And the third is to write the phenotypes of generation number 3, individual 5 and 6, generation number 4, individual 1 and 2. Okay, so let's designate the symbols of the alleles. Let big N be the dominant allele for normal sight. Small n be the recessive allele for color blindness. In order for us to know the genotypes of these 4 generations, let's start with generation number 1. You can notice that both parents are not colorblind since they are not shaded. The father will be X big NY since normal sight is dominant. The mother is also with normal sight. The first X has to be with big N. However, We don't know if the mother is a carrier of color blindness. In order for us to know, we need to look at the couple's children. Number 1, 3 and 5 in generation number 2 are their children. Notice number 3. He is colorblind. That means he will be X small n Y. By this, we will conclude that the mother must be heterozygous and she is the carrier for color blindness. X big N, X small n. Let's move ahead to know the genotypes of individual 1 in the second generation. She's not colorblind, implies she must be X big N. However, we don't know the allele for the second X. Is she homozygous or is she heterozygous? As we did before in the first generation, let's look at the offsprings of generation 3 and 4. Notice boy number 1 in the fourth generation. He is colorblind, X small n Y. By that, we can conclude that the small n has to come from the mother of the third and the second generation, and both will be heterozygous carriers of the trait or the allele for color blindness. X big N, X small n. Let's move on to the fourth generation, girl number 2. This girl has to carry one allele from her father and one allele from the mother. So the girl can be either homozygous with big N from each parent or can be heterozygous big N from the father and small n from the mother. And thus she is either X big N X small n or X big N X big N. Let's move on to discuss girl number 4 in the second generation. She is normal, so she must be X big N since the allele N is dominant. If the allele N is dominant, it can be expressed in a homozygous and in a heterozygous state. Here, in this case, we know nothing about her parents. Moreover, both children are normal, but there is a chance for this mother to give a birth for the third or maybe a fourth child with color blindness. That's why she is X big N or X big N X small n. Take your time to solve the rest and think about them. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate and send me. Now let's answer the third question. The phenotypes. Generation number 3, individual 5 will be boy with color blindness. Generation number 3, individual 6 will be girl with normal sight and carrier for color blindness or not. Generation number 4, individual 1 will be boy with color blindness, and generation number 4, individual 2 will be a girl with normal sight, carrier for color blindness, or she might not be. This is your homework for Thursday. Please draw the following pedigree on a piece of paper and answer the following questions. End of section 14.1.